Welcome to Sunny's Mindset Lab. Today we have a very special guest, former FBI Special Agent Joe Navarro, the author of What Everybody is Saying. We're going to be talking about, that hidden language of the body and how to read people accurately.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to walk your listeners through the science of nonverbal communication and, well, what our bodies are constantly revealing.
And this deep dive is built entirely on your work decades of field-tested findings, scientific facts. We're really trying to move beyond all that, armchair speculation you see everywhere.
That's the goal.
We're here to unpack this silent language, and the mission is pretty clear. Give you the knowledge that can enrich every single interaction, whether that's in business or your personal life. So let's start right at the foundation. Why is nonverbal communication so incredibly dominant?
Well, it's dominant because it's primal, it's ancient. When we really break down interpersonal communication, all the nonverbal behaviors, and that's everything, facial expressions, gestures, posture, even the clothes we wear, the tone of our voice, that makes up about 60 to 65% of the total message.
60 to 65%. That's staggering.
Yeah.
That's the majority of what we're communicating.
It is. And in some contexts, say during lovemaking, it can be 100%. The words are gone and it's all nonverbal.
So in your work, you call these nonverbals tells. What makes these unconscious physical movements so much more reliable than the words we're consciously choosing to say?
They're tells precisely because they bypass our cognitive filter. I mean, when we are consciously putting a sentence together, whether it's a presentation or denial or even, a small social lie, like telling your friend you love their new shirt when you don't, that message comes from the thinking part of our brain.
Neocortex.
Exactly. But the nonverbal behaviors, they're driven by something much deeper, our primal need for survival. And because people are usually completely unaware they're even making these subtle movements, they become this honest, unfiltered window into what they're truly feeling.
I love that emphasis on reliability. You tell this incredible story about presenting your findings to a room full of professional poker players.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that, because they are masters of reading tells.
It was a fascinating intersection, really. One of the attendees, who was a physician, he realized that the systematic observation I was teaching, looking for changes in breathing, subtle hand movements, a sudden rigid posture.
All the little things.
All the little things. He realized those were the exact same techniques he was already using subconsciously with his patients. He wasn't just listening to their words about pain. He was reading their discomfort, their tension, their underlying fear, using the same nonverbal cues he'd used to read an opponent at the poker table.
This knowledge, it works everywhere because the human nervous system is basically uniform.
It is. The nonverbals are powerful because their roots are in survival.
To really get that, we need to talk about the brain. You use the model of the triune brain, the reptilian, the mammalian, and the human or neocortex. To find that honest, silent truth, where do we focus?
We have to focus on the mammalian brain. Specifically the limbic system. That is the core engine. It's the emotional processing center that governs all of our survival behaviors. If you want to know what a person truly feels, you have to look at the reactions that are controlled by this ancient part of the brain.
Okay, let's unpack this limbic system. What is its fundamental #1 directive, and why does that make it the honest brain?
Its primary directive is simple and it's non-negotiable. Survival. It controls these hardwired, automatic, non-cognitive, and instant responses to anything in the environment. It doesn't pause to think. It just reacts to keep you safe.
So it's pure reaction.
Pure reaction. These are behaviors we've honed over millions of years. Reactions to threat, to danger, comfort, discomfort, and they're embedded so deeply that they're incredibly difficult to consciously suppress. I mean, try to hold back a genuine startle reflex. You can't fully control it. And that automatic nature is why limbic behaviors give us the most reliable insight into what someone is really thinking or feeling.
So we have the limbic system reacting honestly, all about survival. Then the contrast is the neocortex. Why do you call that part the part responsible for all our amazing achievements, the lying brain?
Well, the neocortex, our thinking brain, is what gives us language, abstract thought, planning. It separates us from other mammals. But its complexity is also its weakness if you're looking for honesty. Because the neocortex can handle complex thought, it's also perfectly capable of creating and executing a conscious lie.
Right, you can build a whole story.
A very convincing, intricate verbal falsehood. It can lie to authorities, hide a secret, fabricate a story to get an advantage. The neocortex works overtime to create this believable narrative, while at the same time, the limbic system is desperately trying to regulate the stress that narrative is creating.
And that conflict, that interplay between the conscious lie and the subconscious stress.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for, this limbic leakage. You have a really dramatic case study that illustrates this perfectly.
Yes, the case of Ahmed Risam, the millennial bomber, back in December 1999. He was trying to enter the U.S. from Canada with a car full of explosives. Now, Risam was trained. He had a cover story. That was his neocortex working.
But the customs officer, Diana Dean, she wasn't just listening, was she?
No, she was observing his body. She noted his intense nervousness, his unnatural stiffness. He was avoiding eye contact, and most critically, he was sweating excessively, even though it was a cold day.
Sweating, nervousness, those are classic limbic reactions to immediate danger.
Textbook. These were genuine limbic behaviors driven by the sheer terror of being caught. His neocortex was telling him, be cool, stick to the story, but his limbic system was just screaming, danger, you are about to be caught. That leakage, the nervousness, the sweating, that's what justified the secondary inspection. They found the explosives, and they prevented a massive terrorist attack.
The body betrays the mind.
Every time, when the stakes are high enough.
So that leads us to how the limbic system physically reacts. We always hear the phrase fight or flight, but you correct that. What's the real hardwired survival sequence?
The phrase fight or flight is, well, it's incomplete and it's a little backward. The true evolutionary sequence, the one that gives us the best chance of survival, is freeze, flight, then fight. Fighting is always the last resort. It's only used when freezing and fleeing have failed or they just aren't an option.
Okay, let's get into those 3 Fs, starting with the freeze response.
Yeah.
That seems a little counterintuitive. Why would staying still be our first defense?
For our ancestors on the savannah, movement attracts predators. Simple as that. If you can't outrun something or overpower it, your best chance is to become invisible. The freeze response is designed purely to avoid detection. By holding perfectly still, the danger might just pass you by.
And how does that show up today? In a modern context, how do we freeze?
We see it all the time, though it's much more subtle. It happens when people feel caught or they're being chastised by a boss or during a high-pressure interview. They might sit rigidly, almost in what I call the ejector seat position, physically ready to spring up but holding everything still.
Are there any really subtle cues for that?
2 very crucial ones. First, shallow breathing or even holding one's breath. The body is trying to minimize all movement and sound. And second, fixing the feet. The feet might lock together or even wrap around the legs of the chair in a security position. This is a subconscious effort to literally restrain the impulse to run. If I see that, I know that person is stressed by the current topic.
So that's hiding in the open. I guess that can show up in posture too.
Absolutely. Any posture that restricts motion or tries to make you smaller is a form of freezing. A really common one is the turtle effect. The shoulders rise up high towards the ears and the head lowers. It's a primal protective behavior.
Like you're trying to protect your neck, your spinal column, by pulling into a shell.
Precisely. It signals low confidence or humility or fear. You see it in kids when they're being reprimanded. You see it in athletes after a big loss. They're trying to visually disappear.
So if freezing doesn't work, the limbic system shifts to the flight response. Since we can't usually just bolt from a boardroom, how do we signal that need to escape?
The goal is still the same: create distance from the threat. So we do it non-verbally through what are called distancing behaviors. We'll physically lean away from someone we disagree with. We might place objects, a laptop, a purse, a cup in front of ourselves, creating these little blocking barriers.
And the feet, being the most honest part of the body, must give some pretty big clues here.
Oh, they're critical. The brain has already decided it's time to leave, and the feet signal that intention first. A person can be polite, torso facing you, maintaining eye contact, but one or both of their feet will be turned directly toward the nearest exit. That's a huge intention cue.
What about when someone is sitting?
Another clear one is the knee clasp. The person puts both hands on their knees, getting ready to use them as levers to push up and leave. If you see that during a negotiation, you know you're out of time or they are deeply uncomfortable with your offer.
Right. And if flight isn't an option, then comes the last resort, the fight response.
Yeah.
How does that look nonverbally beyond just, insults or yelling?
Well, physical violence is usually not an option, so the aggression gets channeled into these dominance displays. Things like puffing out the chest, invading someone's personal space, or exhibiting what I call territorial leg splays.
Tell me more about that. The legs play. That sounds fascinating.
When a person feels confrontational, or they're ready to assert their dominance, their legs will spread apart. It does two things. First, it gives them greater physical balance, preparing the body for action. And second, it claims a larger physical footprint. It's a nonverbal way of saying, I am standing my ground and I'm ready to deal with this problem.
So if you see someone's posture shift from legs together to a wide stance, you know their discomfort has just escalated.
Into potential aggression, or at the very least, serious resistance.
Okay, so understanding the limbic system and the 3 Fs is the foundation. But to actually apply this, you insist on a rigorous method, what you call the 10 Commandments of reading body language. Let's walk through some of the most critical ones, starting with observation and context.
Yes, the methodology is everything. Commandment number 1 is concerted observation. You have to move beyond just looking and start truly seeing. Most of us are poor observers because we don't practice it. I often cite those studies where people are so focused they don't even see a person in a gorilla suit walk right past them.
Right, we filter out what we're not looking for.
Exactly. Observation has to be a deliberate muscle you strengthen.
And once we are seeing clearly, we apply Commandment 2. Context is key. Why is context so important if these cues are universal?
Because the interpretation is meaningless without it. For example, if someone is trembling and breathing fast right after a car accident, those behaviors are expected. They confirm the stress of the event. But if you see that same cluster of behaviors while they're just ordering a coffee, that's a huge deviation from what the context demands. That's what you need to investigate.
Okay, now for the behaviors themselves, you talk about universal versus idiosyncratic behaviors. What's the difference?
Universal behaviors are signals that most people share worldwide. They're rooted in our shared physiology. A perfect example is lip compression, when the lips press together and seem to disappear. That is a clear, nearly universal sign of trouble or stress. It almost never signals contentment.
And you saw this play out in a real negotiation, right?
I did. A high-stakes corporate negotiation. The opposing lawyer was listening to a specific contract clause, and as it was read, his lips just vanished. It was a silent red flag of severe distress. I knew immediately that that specific clause was the problem. We addressed it head-on and ended up saving my client millions.
So that's universal. What's idiosyncratic?
Idiosyncratic behaviors are unique to an individual. They're personal quirks. Maybe your spouse always tugs on their ear when they're excited, or your child bites their lip when they're stressed. The only way to decode those is by knowing their past behavior.
Which leads right into Commandment 5. Establish baselines. This seems simple, but I imagine it's the foundation for everything.
It's the absolute cornerstone. You cannot spot a deviation if you don't know what normal looks like for that person in that situation. It's like a doctor trying to diagnose an illness without ever having seen the patient healthy. You need that standard to compare against.
So once you have the baseline, you look for Commandment 6, clusters. Why is it so much more reliable to look for multiple tells happening at once?
A single cue can be a fluke. Maybe it's cold. Maybe they have an itch. But when you see a cluster multiple congruent stress behaviors appearing together, the accuracy of your assessment just skyrockets. If you see someone rubbing their neck and their feet are locked and they've put a barrier in front of them, that cluster is overwhelming evidence of severe distress.
And within that cluster, you say to watch for sudden changes. That sounds like the key to predicting what happens next.
Sudden changes are powerful warning signs. They signal an impending action or a sharp emotional shift. I recall observing a man near a cash register. He seemed calm, but the second the drawer opened, his nostrils flared dramatically. That's a limbic behavior to get more oxygen for action. A split second later, he lunged for the cash. That sudden change was the tell.
Okay, let's get practical. How do we distinguish between comfort and discomfort? You say this is the most crucial lens.
It's the ultimate filtering tool. If you take away all the specific names for gestures, what remains is this fundamental assessment. Is the person exhibiting behaviors of contentment and confidence, or are they showing stress and tension? If you're ever unsure what a specific gesture means, just ask yourself that question. If it signals discomfort, you know there's a stressor, and now you have something to explore.
And finally, the last commandment. Be subtle, don't stare.
Yes. Staring is aggressive. It creates the very discomfort you're trying to observe, so it taints your data. The goal is to become a seamless, unbiased observer, taking in the whole picture without making the other person feel like they're under a microscope.
Okay, we have the science, we have the rules. Now let's apply this moving through the body. You say to start from the feet up. Why are the feet and legs the most honest part of the body?
Well, they're the most honest because they're the furthest away from our conscious thinking brain. For millions of years, the first instinct of the limbic system to any danger was to move the feet, freeze, flee, or fight. The neocortex is busy controlling the face for social appearances, but it largely ignores the lower limbs, so the feet react almost instantly.
What are the main intention cues the feet give away?
Foot direction is number one. Where our feet are pointing is where we want to go. If someone's torso is politely facing you, but one foot is aimed at the door, their brain is screaming for an exit. Another one is what we call happy feet, wiggling or bouncing, which signals high confidence and joy.
And the opposite, distress.
Distress often shows up as a foot kick, a sudden aggressive movement, or the freeze response as we talked about, a sudden stop of all foot movement, or locking the ankles tightly, or wrapping the feet around the chair legs. That's the limbic system literally trying to hold the person in place against their instinct to flee.
Okay, moving up to the torso, arms, and shoulders. You say the torso is inherently vulnerable.
It is. The front, the ventral side, is full of vital organs. We protect it instinctively. We turn our front side toward people and things we like. We call that ventral fronting. And when we dislike something, we show ventral denial. We turn our torso away, even just slightly, to create distance and protect ourselves.
So the arms are basically the torso's first line of defense.
Exactly. They rise instinctively to block threats. In everyday life, free, expansive arm movements, especially ones that defy gravity, show high confidence. In contrast, arm withdrawal, pulling the arms in tight to the body or crossing them, is a protective survival tactic.
But what about the classic question? Doesn't crossing your arms just mean you're cold?
That's where context and clusters come in.
Oh,
If
yeah.
the room is warm and someone who is just relaxed suddenly crosses their arms tightly, maybe even gripping their own shoulders in a kind of self-hug, that's a clear pacifying response to a stressor. It's not about temperature. It's about psychological comfort.
What about dominance displays with the arms?
Two big ones. First is arms akimbo, hands on hips, elbows out. It takes up territory and projects authority. The second is the hooding effect. Leaning back, hands laced behind the head. It's a very relaxed, dominant posture that says, I am in charge here.
Now let's get to the hands and fingers. They must reveal incredibly subtle cues.
They do. The brain dedicates immense processing power to assessing hands. We need to know if they're holding a weapon.
What's the most powerful, high-confidence display you can see in the hands?
That would be steepling. It's when the fingertips of both hands touch, forming a kind of church steeple. It's the gold standard for high-confidence nonverbals. It signals absolute certainty. Another one is showing the thumbs, especially thumbs sticking out of pockets. That's another gravity-defying high-status signal.
And low confidence.
The opposite. Thumbs tucked inside the pockets with just the fingers hanging out. That's a classic low-status, low-confidence display. Also, any kind of intense, vigorous rubbing or wringing of the hands signals high distress.
You talk a lot about pacifying behaviors with the hands, especially touching the neck. Why is that so significant?
It's a highly reliable stress indicator. Touching or stroking the neck is the body's way of calming itself down after a stressor. It stimulates nerves, like the vagus nerve, which helps regulate heart rate. Men often grasp the back of their neck. Women very frequently touch or cover the suprasternal notch, that little dimple at the base of the throat.
And you saw this give away a huge secret in an investigation.
Absolutely. We were questioning a fugitive's mother. She verbally denied knowing where he was, but every time we asked, she would cover that suprasternal notch. Her neocortex was telling the lie, but her limbic system, in deep distress, initiated that self-soothing behavior. It told us she was profoundly uncomfortable with that topic. We later found her son hiding in the house.
So finally, we arrive at the face, the mind's canvas. We know it's the easiest to fake. So how do we still find honest signals there?
We look for speed and subtlety. The limbic system still leaks extremely fast, momentary signals, microexpressions. One critical mechanism is eye blocking. It's a subconscious way to shield the brain from seeing something undesirable. It can be a squint or a brief, prolonged eyelid closure after hearing bad news. Even people born blind will cover their eyes when they hear something awful.
What about the mouth and jaw?
Jaw tightening is a clear sign of tension, but the most universal sign of trouble is lip compression or occlusion. When the lips disappear into a thin line, something is wrong. If you see that, you know the person is troubled. We also look for the sneer, a one-sided lift of the upper lip. That's a tell for pure contempt.
And if there are mixed signals, someone says, I'm happy, but their jaw is clenched, what do we trust?
Always side with the negative emotion. The negative signal is almost always the genuine one. It's the limbic system's immediate, unfiltered reaction before the neocortex has time to put on the socially appropriate mask. The clenched jaw is the truth. The happy words are the lie.
Okay, let's bring this all together by returning to that core principle. Comfort versus discomfort. You say pacifying behaviors are the key to unlocking this. Why are they so critical?
They're critical because they are the actions the body takes to calm itself down after a stressor. They're coping mechanisms. And since they are triggered by the limbic system to relieve tension, they accurately reveal a person's state of anxiety and can often be linked directly to whatever just caused it.
Besides neck touching, what are some other key pacifiers people should look for?
A very common one is leg cleansing. That's when a person puts their hands, palm down on their thighs, and rubs them down toward the knee. It's a self-soothing rhythm, and it's also a way to dry, sweaty palms, a classic stress response. Another one is the ventilator, pulling the shirt collar away from the neck. It's a sign of profound discomfort, a desire to escape the pressure.
So the real power comes from linking the pacifier to the stimulus.
That's it. You have to ask, what caused them to do that right now? For example, in a job interview, a candidate is calm until you ask about their last job, and suddenly they start vigorously rubbing their thighs. That pacifying spike flags that specific topic as the problem area.
We have to address the elephant in the room. How do we use this to detect deception? You have a very important warning about this.
I do, and it must be said loudly. No single body language cue is a foolproof guarantee of lying. We are not human lie detectors. The problem is that the behaviors people mistake for deception, nervousness, fidgeting, rigidity, are really just manifestations of stress. An innocent person under pressure will often show the exact same behaviors as a guilty person.
So if the goal isn't to spot a lie, what is the investigator's method?
The goal is to spot signs of discomfort that happen at the exact moment a critical question is asked. The method is to first build rapport, create a comfortable environment to get a low-stress baseline. Then, when you ask the tough questions, you look for significant deviations from that baseline.
What are some of the nonverbal patterns you look for to assess the possibility of deception? You mentioned synchrony.
Yes, synchrony versus asynchrony. Synchrony is harmony. When someone is truthful, their body language supports their words immediately and fluidly. Asynchrony is a red flag. It's when the body's movement is delayed or it contradicts the words. For instance, someone says, I didn't do it, but their head shade is weak or delayed by a split second. The body isn't committed to the lie.
What about a lack of emphasis?
Liars often show weak, passive nonverbals. The honest limbic system won't commit the body to the falsehood. A truthful person might pound the table for emphasis. A liar making that same point will avoid that commitment. Their gestures will be small or they'll disappear altogether.
And finally, those blocking and distancing behaviors we talked about.
Deceptive individuals often use physical barriers, a pillow, a backpack, to create separation. They might sit in that rigid ejector seat position, clutching the armrests, ready to flee. And interestingly, they sometimes use what's called the rogatory position, palms up, as if pleading to be believed. A truthful person states facts. A person seeking belief for a lie often pleads for it.
This has been an incredibly detailed deep dive. For our listeners, how does this all apply to everyday life relationships, interviews, negotiations?
It's an essential communication tool. In a negotiation, seeing that lip compression tells you which clause is causing distress so you can address it. In a job interview, seeing steepling versus thumbs in pockets gives you insight into a candidate's confidence. In relationships, noticing ventral denial or a change in foot direction can help you address friction before it becomes a real conflict. It doesn't replace conversation, it enriches it.
And you stress that this knowledge must be used ethically. What is your strongest warning?
My strongest warning is this. Never, ever jump to conclusions or declare someone dishonest based solely on nonverbal behavior. Nonverbals indicate discomfort, not necessarily deceit. Responsible interpretation requires context, a baseline, looking for clusters, and always verifying the facts. Use this to guide your inquiry and understand people, not to pass judgment.
Joe, thank you for sharing these powerful insights. Understanding body language truly helps us understand others and ourselves.
Thank you. The body is always speaking. When we learn to listen, everything changes.
This has been Sunny's Mindset Lab. Stay aware, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next episode.